Hello there. Welcome to my website today. Interesting column I wrote this week that I hope you'll take the time to look over, and that's about the overwhelming number of natural disasters taking place in this country today. As I speak right now, we have three different hurricanes in the Atlantic Ocean coming up into the Gulf. Three different hurricanes. That hasn't happened in many, many years. At the same time we have those hurricanes, we've got a massive outbreak of wildfires out in Oregon, where I'm going next week. Also in Utah, where I'll also be next week. Tremendous number of wildfires that are destroying thousands of acres and burning up homes. That is a recurring event. We've had some tornadoes in Oklahoma and the Panhandle here this last year. The continuing flooding that takes place used to be we get some heavy rains here at my home of Baton Rouge last year. The rain stood right over us and poured in torrents for several weeks, causing massive flooding. Thousands of people are still out of their homes a year after that all took place. And these events continue. Hurricane Sandy was such a devastating event for the East Coast. And now we see a hurricane going right up towards the East Coast again. You know that half the population in this country live within 100 miles of coastlines. And so these disasters continue to build and continue to cost the American public billions and billions of dollars. When a hurricane hits us here in Louisiana or the wildfires out west, those folks just can't handle the financial burden to rebuild, to repair, to put back together the infrastructure. So they go to Washington. We see the bailout on Hurricane Harvey taking place right now. Irma will be right behind it. And instead of dealing with other issues important to the country, we're trying to rebuild what we have to the cost, again, of billions and billions of dollars. And it's something I think that Congress and the states have been very short-sighted in considering, that you don't look on these as individual events. These natural disasters cause a nationwide problem, a nationwide response, and we haven't had that. I know a lot about this. I served as Louisiana's insurance commissioner back in the 1990s up to the year 2000, and in that we had the same problems then. The Corps of Engineers down in the New Orleans area has a scale model of the Mississippi River and all the levee system there. And this is before Katrina. And the projections were, when I went down to look at the model, that based on certain flood levels up in the Midwest or a hurricane hitting New Orleans, you could see 26 feet in downtown New Orleans, 26 feet. Well, I thought that was just out of the question, but still something that shows some concern. And so in 1995, I proposed a National Hurricane Disaster Act, something I worked with other insurance commissioners, put together a plan that I thought made sense, saying, look, we're all in this together, so let's advance pay for what could happen. Let's take a small portion of everyone's insurance policy, 1 or 2%, and put it into a national fund. You'd build state funds for states that wanted to buy in and one overall national fund. I know this gets kind of complicated with the numbers, but the term you hear often is reinsurance. Insurance companies buy insurance just like you and I buy insurance to cover them in case a massive disaster hits them and they don't have enough reserves to pay for all the claims that are made. They buy insurance called reinsurance. And basically, we put together a national reinsurance response so that if an insurance company, let's say in my home state of Louisiana, sold you a property insurance that included flood, which it doesn't right now. You go to the federal government for flood insurance, but right now they could do that, and they would have to pay up to a certain amount. Above a certain amount, let's say $500 million in claims if they were a small company, then they would turn to the state fund, and there would be a state fund that would have built up these premiums over a period of years. And then if the state couldn't handle it up to a certain amount, they'd go to the national fund. Really, there'd be very little federal money or state money involved if you did it in advance and started building up those funds. I thought it was a great idea and worked with other commissioners. We took it to Congress. Senator John Breaux, Louisiana senator at the time, got very interested in the program. I testified before a U.S. Senate panel about the importance of this fund. And I talked about the disasters that were going to continue to take place. And by the way, that 26-foot figure I said would never happened when Katrina took place in 2005. Well, the Senate understood the problem. The Senate passed legislation to create such a fund. Then it got bogged down in politics in the House of Representatives, and some states didn't know how the payout would go. I said, look, you'd buy in, you'd have actuaries consider what your risk level is, and you would buy in based on that risk. For example, if you lived up in, say, Michigan that hasn't had a lot of disasters, you wouldn't pay in very much. But if you lived in Louisiana, lived in wildfire country out in Oregon or California, you'd pay in more. It would be rated just like you're rated today for car insurance or other types of insurance. Those with higher risk pay more. And so it looked like it made good sense, passed the United States Senate, but got bogged down in the House of Representatives. And now we just kind of let things go. Well, this hopefully could be the time to revisit that program. There's a lot of interest because we can't keep going back to the federal government and spending the billions of dollars. Hurricane Harvey is projected to be over $100 billion. Now we've got Hurricane Irma, a third hurricane beyond that, all the wildfires. It's going to cost this country a lot of money. And I think a national hurricane response is the way to deal with this problem. You can read about it in my column this week that's posted right now on this website. Hope you look it over. And if you have an interest, talk to your congressman or your senator about it. I hope some momentum will take to move that along. Hey, thanks for being with me. I'm going to be out next week, by the way, in both Oregon and Utah. I'll be out there on some business, building some relatives. I've got a daughter out in Oregon, but I'll be right there in the midst of those wildfires. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more about this problem. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you again next week.